offers this personal, almost wry observation. I do nothing, granted, but I see the hours pass, which is better than trying to fill them.
So watching time pass is better than frantic activity.
For him, yes. It's not just laziness, it's a philosophical stance. It's rejecting the Sisyphean task of living and striving in what he sees as a pointless universe.
Yeah.
And what we normally call wisdom.
Yeah.
For Ciaran, wisdom is ultimately only a perpetual thinking it over. I use non-action as first impulse.
Non-action as the first impulse. So true wisdom is resignation, detachment.
And profound resignation, yeah. Recognizing the futility of it all, leading to this state of detached non-engagement. It's a really challenging thought for, a world built on getting things done.
No kidding. Okay, now let's pivot. Let's take Ciaran's incredibly bleak view, this philosophy of unmaking, the catastrophe of birth, and contrast it with something totally different, extreme pronatalism.
Right, the other end of the spectrum entirely.
Our sources mention Project 2025 as a way to illustrate the implied ideals here. And just to be clear for everyone listening, we're using this as a conceptual example from our material, focusing on the ideology itself. The extreme pronatalist stance, not getting into the weeds of any specific political platform. We're staying impartial, just exploring the ideas.
Absolutely. It's about the clash of concepts.
And these two perspectives, Cioranian and extreme pronatalism, man, they seem like absolute polar opposites, like they couldn't be further apart.
They couldn't be more diametrically opposed, truly. While, as you said, the specifics aren't detailed in our sources beyond using it conceptually, the core idea of extreme pronatalism would fundamentally champion birth. It would see it as a supreme societal good, maybe even an absolute imperative.
The total antithesis of Ciaran.
The utter antithesis. From that pronatalist perspective, birth wouldn't be a catastrophe. It would be celebrated as inherently good, perhaps even sacred.
Essential for society.
Essential for national strength, cultural continuity, societal vitality, all of that. It would likely be framed not just as a personal choice, but as a duty. A moral imperative, even, to procreate to ensure the future.
So the focus is all on more people.
Intensely focused on increasing the population, ensuring a future workforce, keeping demographic stability, fostering progress through new generations, carrying the torch. Humanity's main purpose, in this view, would be propagation, continuing the species.
And individuals find meaning in contributing to that.
Exactly. Meaning comes from being part of that collective future. New births are seen with total hope and optimism, fresh starts, chances for improvement, solutions to problems.
So any questioning of birth's value, like Ciaran's entire philosophy, would be
swiftly dismissed, probably labeled nihilistic, counterproductive, morally deficient, maybe even seen as dangerous to the collective good. It's a worldview built entirely on expansion optimism and this almost unquestioning belief in the inherent goodness of creating more life.
So when you put Ciaran's philosophy, this deep lament over being born right next to those pronatalist ideals, it feels like they just can't coexist in the same thought universe. The conflict seems absolute.
The conflict is absolute. It's an irreconcilable opposition of fundamental values. Ciorana would undoubtedly see a pronatalist agenda as the ultimate expression of humanity's deepest delusions.
It's self-deception.
It's most profound self-deception,
Yeah.
And just a further tragic entanglement in the suffering that he believes is inherent in being born. It represents humanity. Pronatalism says sovereign good, the cornerstone of well-being, total apathy.
Their direction, purpose.
Ciaran advocates unmaking, decreating, a retreat into inner stillness, that longing for the non-born. Pronatalism demands active creation, relentless expansion through procreation. That's the only path to progress in their view.
And their ideas about where evil comes from, or even just the nature of reality.
Yeah.
Completely opposed too, right? One says the problem's behind us, the other says it's ahead.
Precisely. Future obstacles, things to be overcome by a bigger, stronger population. A test of our will.
And reality itself, Ciaran thinks it's shaky, maybe insane.
Yeah, he says everything is without basis, without substance, that reality falls within the province of lunacy, an inherently unstable foundation. Pronatalism, on the other hand, needs to insist on a robust, purposeful reality for all those new lives. A world full of potential.
What about the future? Ciaran's not optimistic.
Not at all. He sees the future as superfluous and hideous. He thinks humanity just keeps aggravating its existing evils. Pronatalism invests in the future. It sees it as malleable, improvable, crying out for more people.
And personally, consciousness as torment versus potential.
Right. Ciorana. Consciousness and identity are torment, tied to that cosmogonic discomfort. Pronatalism celebrates the unique potential of each new life, tends to dismiss existential suffering as maybe a secondary issue or something to be overcome for the greater good of perpetuation.
And you mentioned a gendered perspective Ciorán cites.
Yes, it's quite extreme. He quotes Gnostic texts with lines like, "Men will be the very act of bringing life into the world, making that the root of suffering and the thing to be destroyed," which is, of course, the absolute opposite of what pronatalism would celebrate with, the greatest possible enthusiasm. The gulf isn't just intellectual, it's existential. It's about the fundamental value or disvalue of existence.
So if Ciorán were here today looking at a movement championing more births, celebrating creation, he'd have some strong words, I imagine. Very strong, unflinching words.
Oh, without a doubt. He wouldn't mince them. He'd regard it with, I think, profound disdain. He'd see it as a monumental collective delusion,
A delusion, why?
because it's a testament to humanity's endless capacity for self-deception. For him, it would just be another desperate, misguided attempt by man to fill the hours, to paper over that existential void with useful things, even though deep down we supposedly know everything is pointless.
So pronatalism is just more proof of human madness.
Proof of our madness and stupidity.
Yeah.
Trapped in our false instincts, our biological urges, instead of transcending them towards detachment. He'd likely see it as a tragic example of man being able to remedy his evils only by aggravating them,
Aggravating them, how?
by simply increasing the number of born individuals. For Ciorán, that wouldn't solve anything. It would just multiply the catastrophe. It would amplify the universal chagrin of emerging into existence, just creating more conscious beings destined for suffering.
So more people equals more suffering, in his view.
Directly. He might see pronatalism as a prime example of us being unable to get past our basic biological drives, clinging to them instead of embracing that bleak detachment he advocates. It's a refusal to confront the extreme truths and the unreality of everything.
Choosing comforting illusions over harsh reality.
Exactly. Preferring the comforting lies.
Mhm.
Ultimately, Ciorán might suggest that this whole emphasis on birth is no more than the craving for the insoluble carried to the point of insanity.
A craving for the insoluble, like trying to solve a problem by making it bigger.
Precisely. A frantic, misguided effort to just keep perpetuating a fundamentally flawed, suffering existence. It's like humanity doubling down on its original mistake, hoping that more of the same will somehow magically lead to a different outcome. He'd see it as profoundly irrational. #3, insomnia, altered states, and the uncanny mind.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit now. From the grand cosmic era of birth, let's move to something more immediate, but maybe just as unsettling. Sleeplessness. Insomnia.
Ah, yes. The intimate torment.
Our sources describe some really vivid, quite disorienting effects of insomnia. They show how the mind can get pushed right to its limits when it doesn't get that essential rest.
And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? If Ciorán's own well-documented struggles with severe insomnia didn't directly fuel his particular brand of philosophy.
It seems almost certain, reading this.
It's a fascinating and very direct link, actually. What's really striking is how the sources go into such detail about these altered states, these changed perceptions that come from sleep deprivation, even if they don't always use the specific word hallucination.
Right. It's more subtle sometimes.
It can be, but the effects are profound. Sleepless nights can leave you feeling not just tired, but fragmented, like you're in pieces, stupid, dazed, in such distress that your reality itself starts to feel, well, frayed.
Frayed, yeah. How does it affect perception?
Well, the perception of other people can be deeply altered. After a long night awake, familiar faces might suddenly look like automatons or specters.
Like their humanity is gone, revealing something mechanical underneath.
Exactly, something mechanical, almost alien. And your own thoughts, your mental state, hugely affected. Thoughts themselves are described as the fruit of sleeplessness,
The fruit of sleeplessness, what kind of fruit?
often dwelling on pernicious truths, those uncomfortable, dark insights that Ciorán himself grapples with constantly. It's like sleeplessness strips away the protective layers of normal thinking, leaving you exposed to these raw, unsettling realities.
Like your defenses are down.
Completely down. There's this tangible sense that your common sense, your very reason, might be under threat. One source warns that sleepless nights devour the last vestiges of our common sense, our modesty, and would rob us of our reason if the fear of ridicule didn't come to save us.
Fear of ridicule saves our reason. That's interesting.
Isn't it? Like social pressure is the last defense against madness induced by lack of sleep. Time perception can also get weird, intensely concentrated, a blur, and long-term sleeplessness can lead to this state described as living in the unligged world.
the unlived world, like being detached, dreamlike, but awake.
That's the sense of it, a detached, almost unreal state while you're wide awake. And interestingly, the sources note that sleepless nights are often particularly memorable, unlike nights you actually sleep.
Why is that? Because they're so awful.
Maybe because they're so vivid, so intense, they etch themselves deeper into your consciousness, precisely because they're so disorienting. And one passage describes, quite chillingly, how the unheard of becomes everyday easy when sleep is absent.
The unheard of becomes everyday easy, like the bizarre becomes normal.
Yeah, a breakdown of the normal filters of perception. The impossible just becomes part of the landscape.
Okay, so if insomnia strips away our usual filters, makes us feel in pieces, exposes this raw, unsettling reality, does this connect directly to the idea of the uncanny in our sources?
That feeling where the familiar suddenly becomes strange, deeply unsettling, or even frightening.
Yeah, it sounds like insomnia could be a prime breeding ground for that kind of perception, like it lays bare some uncomfortable truth about ourselves or reality.
It absolutely does connect. When you zoom out and look at the bigger picture, the sources definitely explore how these altered perceptions caused by sleeplessness align perfectly with the uncanny.
So what is the uncanny exactly in this context?
Well, in essence, it's that deeply unsettling feeling you get when something familiar, something you thought you understood, something mundane, suddenly becomes strange, alien, frightening even. It blurs the lines of what you thought was real.
The reassuring order breaks down.
Precisely. You start to doubt the animate nature of things, or you perceive mechanical processes where they shouldn't be, like those automatons you mentioned.
Right, and the sources mention other examples.
Yeah, like experiencing certain mental diseases, epilepsy is mentioned. It can create an uncanny impression because the body, which we usually see as this unified living thing, is suddenly revealed as a complex, almost clockwork mechanism.
That dark knowledge about our mechanical nature. That's unsettling.
Deeply unsettling. It strips away that comforting illusion of organic unity. The sources also touch on horror fiction, contrasting Lovecraft's very concrete visual monstrosities with someone like Algernon Blackwood's evocation of vaguer, nameless presences.
So the uncanny can be monstrous or just. A feeling. A presence.
Exactly. Sometimes it's overt, sometimes it's this insidious sense of unseen, unsettling forces, a pervasive feeling that something is fundamentally wrong. And significantly, the supernatural is described as the metaphysical counterpart of insanity.
Metaphysical counterpart of insanity. Meaning?
It implies that perceiving reality in a way that deviates strongly from the norm, seeing nameless presences, experiencing that breakdown of order, is fundamentally intertwined with mental disarray. It's on the border of madness.
So insomnia, by messing with our perceptions, pushes us towards that uncanny border.
It certainly can. By disrupting our normal filters, our protective mental barriers, it can definitely push us towards these uncanny experiences. It makes the mundane feel alien, blurs those lines between rational and strange. It really reveals how fragile our constructed reality actually is.
It sounds like our consciousness itself, then, is maybe a pretty precarious thing. Like it's constantly teetering on the edge of these uncanny, altered states.
Makes you wonder how much of normal reality is just a very carefully maintained illusion, doesn't it? A collective agreement to ignore the really unsettling stuff.
Exactly. Is that what the sources suggest?
That's a crucial point, and yes, the sources strongly infer that. They suggest that a heightened or unfiltered awareness, the kind that deep sleeplessness or Cioranian's kind of extreme lucidity can bring, can be inherently problematic. It can even lead to psychological collapse.
Cioranian himself felt that risk.
He did. He suggested his own chronic depression and insomnia could easily have driven him to outright madness if he hadn't found an outlet in writing. Like it was a way to offload the unbearable weight of his own consciousness.
A form of self-therapy.
Essentially. And think about Dostoevsky's Underground Man, mentioned in the sources. He embodies this debilitating self-consciousness. His heightened awareness makes him feel like an insect, makes him see his condition as a disease.
So knowing too much, being too aware, can be dangerous.
That's the implication. Living a normal life, the sources suggest, requires us to maintain illusions, pretenses about reality. They're called necessary fabrications or contrivances, things that buffer us from an unbearable truth.
Necessary fabrications.
Wow.
It goes further. Consciousness itself is described as being anchored to hallucinations.
Anchored to hallucinations.
Yeah.
Meaning our normal reality is a hallucination.
Or at least relies on fabricated perceptions that aren't strictly real. Losing these necessary illusions can lead to a state where your whole perception of reality fundamentally shifts, maybe breaks down. like a true psychotic break.
And the sources link this to collective sanity, too. Yes, the idea that knowing we are nothing but human puppets could lead to insanity and great epidemics of madness. It suggests our collective delusion is actually vital for societal stability.
And feeling controlled.
Someone who genuinely feels telecommanded, remote controlled by some alien force is explicitly identified as suffering from a psychological disease. They'd be sent to a psychiatric hospital. This directly links that kind of delusional perception to diagnosed mental illness, showing how crucial our shared reality is.
But Cioran valued lucidity.
He did. He said, lucidity is the only vice which makes us free in a desert. But, and this is key, he immediately adds, if there is so much discomfort in ambiguity, in lucidity, it is because lucidity is the result of the poor use to which we have put our sleepless nights, our obsession with birth.
So the lucidity born from insomnia and the birth trauma, it's freeing but isolating, devastating.
Exactly. It frees you from comforting lies, but it leaves you utterly alone in this desert of raw, unvarnished, and often unbearable truth.
Okay, so pulling all these threads together, Cioran's radical views on birth, these insights into consciousness, insomnia, the uncanny. What does this deep dive ultimately tell us about the human condition itself? Is suffering really as central, as foundational as Cioran suggests?
Or is there more to it? Some other narrative we tell ourselves?
Yeah.
Well, what really stands out here, I think, is how suffering gets elevated. It's not just, a hardship we encounter sometimes. It becomes an inherent, fundamental aspect of being human. And it stems directly, in this view, from that catastrophe of birth.
So it's not optional, it's woven in.
Woven into the very fabric of our being. Inseparable from existence, it's pervasive. Cioran bluntly states, all is suffering. And he echoes that Buddhist idea, all is nightmare.
All is nightmare.
And it's profoundly rooted in that cosmogonic discomfort we talked about, that primal unease at the core of existence. The sources even explicitly equate existence itself with torment.
Existence is torment, not just contains torment.
Is torment. That's the assertion. It's not hyperbole for him. It's about the intrinsic nature of being alive. He even suggests that imaginary pains, the pains we conjure up, are the most real because we have this constant human need for them.
And need for pain. Why?
Almost as if we subconsciously seek it out or create it, just to affirm our reality. To feel something tangible in a world he often views as illusory, pain becomes the marker of the real, however unpleasant.
So we need it to feel alive, even if it hurts.
Perhaps. And remember that provocative comparison he makes. What is that one crucifixion compared to the daily kind any insomniac endures?
Right. Prioritizing mental anguish over physical.
Exactly. Highlighting how internal conscious torment, the relentless suffering of the mind, amplified by sleeplessness, can dwarf even these huge historical symbols of physical pain. So yes, suffering is presented as relentless, inescapable, not an optional extra, but the constant background hum defining every moment.
Okay. Given all that, if existence is inherently suffering, if it's a nightmare, it makes absolute sense that we'd have this intense, almost desperate drive to find meaning, doesn't it?
We need to create purpose, even if, like you said earlier, it's based on illusions.
Right. If life is fundamentally painful and maybe pointless, we need something to justify it, to make it bearable, or at least comprehensible.
Absolutely. And when we bring this all together, that human need for meaning really does seem to arise from what the sources call a damning surplus of consciousness.
A damning surplus.
Yeah. This heightened awareness makes us acutely sensitive to the suffering and, crucially, sensitive to the perceived lack of inherent purpose in the world. Nature, for Cioran and thinkers like Safa mentioned in the sources, just is. It operates without giving us a meaning, without a neat plot. And as conscious beings, we find it hard, maybe impossible, to just linger in that vacuity, that emptiness.
We crave more. We need a story.
We need a story. So humans employ all these intricate strategies to cope with the void. Primarily, the sources say, by artificially limiting the content of consciousness.
Limiting awareness. Because the full truth is too much.
Because a full apprehension of man's condition is simply unbearable. It could lead to madness, like we discussed. The philosopher Peter Wessel-Zaff, whose ideas are drawn on here, identified 4 key strategies like psychological defense mechanisms we use to shield ourselves.
Okay, what are they?
First, there's isolation. This is where we mentally push uncomfortable truths, mortality, meaninglessness, the randomness of birth into, like, remote compartments in our minds.
We know they're there, but we ignore them.
Exactly. A conspiracy of silence, Zaff calls it, both individually and collectively.
Okay, number 2.
Anchoring. This is where we grab onto big, solid frameworks to give life stability. Things like God, morality, the state, family, science, art.
Things that give structure and purpose.
Right. They provide stability, a fixed point. But Zaffa notes these anchors are getting increasingly punctured by criticism in our modern world, so they're maybe less effective now.
Makes sense. Third,
Distraction. This is probably the most common one. Just diverting our attention, focusing on things that don't challenge our basic view of things.
entertainment, hobbies, work.
Bingo. Entertainment, hobbies, careers, social media. Even, Zaffa says, pointless intellectual exercises if they avoid the big questions. Just keeping busy, keeping the mind occupied so we don't face the void.
And the last one.
Sublimation. This one's interesting. It's transforming the harmful content, the suffering, the angst, into something seen as positive, like art or philosophy.
Turning pain into beauty or insight.
Exactly. But Zaffa calls it an escape through a bogus simulation of the very pain we're trying to avoid. We create something from the anguish, but it's still fundamentally a reaction to the suffering, not really transcending it.
So consciousness lets us make stories, create meaning where nature offers none.
Right. Stories with better plots than just survival and reproduction. But the sources are often quite critical of these efforts. They call them illusions, self-deception, fabrications, games, tricks. Even grand philosophical systems are sometimes seen as detached from the gross facts of our lives, the raw reality of suffering.
So the meaning we crave often feels fragile, a necessary lie.
A fragile construct, yeah.
Yeah.
A necessary lie we tell ourselves and each other just to keep functioning in the face of, well, everything Cioranian talks about.
So what does this whole worldview, this deep dive into suffering, birth, illusory meaning, what does it imply about our actual journey through life? You know, that span between the catastrophe of birth and the inevitability of death.
It sounds like we're constantly running from something and towards something else simultaneously, like our past and future selves are in this frantic chase.
You've really captured the core paradox beautifully there. Cioranian describes this exactly like that. Fleeing the catastrophe of birth, survivors struggling to forget it.
Struggling to forget the start.
And at the same time, our thoughts, he says, are in the pay of our panic. They're constantly oriented toward the future, follow the trail of all fear, open out onto death.
So we're fleeing our origin in panic, and our panic pushes us towards fearing our end. It's a trap.
It presents this symmetrical, almost inescapable human condition, doesn't it? Flight from the painful origin, fearful focus on the inevitable end. Our normal life trajectory is just trying to escape that initial trauma by moving forward, always forward.
Only to find ourselves moving steadily towards another abyss, death.
It's like imagine your past self, the one freshly traumatized by birth, running as fast as it can away from that moment, trying to put distance between itself and the start.
Okay.
And then imagine your future self, knowing death is coming, running towards that end point, but filled with dread and trying to maybe slow down or bargain for time. They're moving in opposite directions along the timeline, aren't they?
One fleeing backward from birth, one hurtling forward towards death. Yeah, I see that. So what happens when they meet? Where do they collide?
They collide right in the middle, don't they? And doesn't that sound an awful lot like the concept of a midlife crisis? That point where the past catches up, the future looms large, and the present feels, well, stuck, trapped.
Wow. That collision point, yes.
Yes.
That moment where the flight from birth and the fear of death converge with this intense clarity. It often does manifest as that profound existential crisis, the midlife reckoning.
When the distractions stop working.
Exactly. When the energy of youth, the striving, the anchoring, the distractions, when that starts to fade and the deeper questions just become unavoidable, you look back at the catastrophe of your birth with this new, maybe melancholic lucidity.
And you look forward at death coming faster.
And you see death approaching, undeniably. It's a moment of acute awareness of both the origin and the end. And that makes the present feel incredibly heavy, full of those pernicious truths Cioranian was talking about.
Is there any way out of that collision, according to Cioranian?
Well, he suggests a radical alternative to just being caught in this panic-driven trajectory. He thinks we can actually invert their course.
Invert the course. How?
By sending our thoughts deliberately backward when we direct them toward birth and force them to linger upon it.
So instead of fleeing birth, turn around and confront it. Stare it down.
Exactly. A deliberate, probably arduous process of confronting that original catastrophe head-on. And remarkably, he claims that doing this makes you lose even that vigor, that unappeasable tension which underlies the horror of death.
Confronting birth lessens the fear of death. How?
It's paradoxical, isn't it? But the idea seems to be that by truly accepting and dwelling on the trauma of being born, you somehow diminish the horror and intensity of dying. As if dealing with the initial wound takes the charge out of the inevitable end, it's a complete reorientation of our existential panic.
Away from the future, back to the origin.
Right. He talks about longing for a state that existed before stooping to a name, a null plenitude of a self anterior to selfhood, pure potential before the burden of being an individual was imposed.
And he found happiness in just thinking about not being born.
He contemplates the happiness, the freedom, the sheer space found in merely musing on not having been born. For him, that thought experiment offers a true, if only theoretical, liberation.
And the sources say we have lost being born as much as we shall lose dying.
Yeah, implying both events are fundamentally beyond our control. They're like these absences, these voids that bookend our existence. He asserts with this chilling simplicity, no difference between being and non-being if we apprehend them with the same intensity.
Wow. And that line, non-existence never hurt anyone, while existence hurts everyone.
Powerful, isn't it? It makes the desire for non-existence seem almost rational, a compelling counterpoint to our usual instinct to cling to life. Though even Cioranian admitted that regarding death, he ceaselessly wavered between mystery and inconsequentiality, between the pyramids and the morgue.
So even he couldn't fully resolve the end.
It shows the struggle continues, even from his perspective of radical detachment. So our life becomes this frantic, paradoxical flight from an original catastrophe, a journey dictated by panic, constantly bumping into the shadows of our beginning and our end. Unless we take that radical, difficult path of turning back to confront the source. Hashtag outro.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Today we've taken a really deep dive into Emile Cioran's radical indictment of birth. It's a perspective that truly challenges the very foundations of how we value life, how we think about procreation.
Yeah, and we've seen how sharply this philosophy contrasts with those pronatalist ideals,
Yeah.
presenting this absolute opposition of purpose and meaning. It really highlights a fundamental tension in human values, doesn't it?
It really does. And we also explored the profound, sometimes deeply unsettling altered states that sleeplessness can bring on, and how they seem to highlight the often illusory, maybe fragile nature of our consensus reality.
Exposing those necessary fabrications we might be living by without even realizing it.
Exactly. So bringing this all together, what seems to emerge is this complex, maybe unflinching understanding of the human condition. One rooted in suffering, right from the moment of our unwelcome arrival, perhaps.
And driven by this desperate, often illusory search for meaning to make it all bearable. Cioranian really forces us almost to look unflinchingly at the origins of our discomfort, the paradoxes of consciousness, instead of just accepting the usual stories or distracting ourselves endlessly.
Which raises a pretty important question for you, the listener. How much of what you hold as fundamentally true or good might actually be one of those necessary illusions, a contrivance to keep things stable?
And how much are you willing to challenge those comforting pretenses? Are you willing to confront what Cioranian calls those pernicious truths, even if they're deeply uncomfortable?
And for our final provocative thought today, if, as Cioranian suggests, we do not rush toward death, we flee the catastrophe of birth, survivors struggling to forget it, what personal catastrophe, maybe big or small, are you subconsciously fleeing from in your own life?
And what would it actually mean to follow Cioranian's advice? To divert that course, turn around and confront it head on, rather than just running towards the next distraction or hurtling blindly towards whatever end awaits.
Yeah. Consider how Cioranian's acceptance of unmaking, decreating as maybe the only truly authentic task. How might that radically redefine your own pursuits? Or perhaps paradoxically offer an unexpected, even stark form of liberation in a world that just constantly demands you build, achieve, create, and above all, keep going?
Something to definitely mull over.